everybody. This is really big-time breaking news here. We might be one of the very first podcasts to report it, but on Thursday evening, right before we did this, Apple's going to require the majority of Intel's smartphone modem business for $1 billion, the two companies announced. This is humongous news. The acquisition means that Apple is now well on its way to producing its own 5G modems for smartphones rather than having to rely on Qualcomm for the hardware. One of the scrutinies that Apple has accused Qualcomm of charging disproportionately high fees in patent royalties, which was accused by forcing the companies to agree what they want to access to its hardware as part of the no license, no chip policy. As we all kind of remember, Apple and Qualcomm did have a legal issue going on. Apple and Qualcomm reached a 6-year patent license agreement. So what does this mean? Well, Qualcomm is probably the number one spot that every mobile smartphone goes to from chips. Qualcomm is a company that I actually have an investment in myself. And this is a pretty crazy thing because Apple was going to go with Intel, but when Intel couldn't make 5G modems, they went over to Qualcomm. So this is a pretty big deal, I think, as the breaking news happens. Apple at some point is going to make their own modems, and they're going to perfect it, and they're going to not rely on Qualcomm. So I think eventually we're going to get back to the Apple-Qualcomm fight, but for right now, for at least a couple of years, that's not going to happen. But Intel was ready to call it quits. In fact, they announced right after Apple and Qualcomm made a deal, they announced that they were not going to pursue any 5G modems or quit the modem business altogether. So this is a pretty big deal of breaking news right now from this week. There really wasn't too much news this week, but this is a pretty big one. So take a look. I actually got this article from The Verge right on Apple News. I actually like using Apple News for this. So I would check it out, read the whole article, and kind of learn a little bit about this for everything. But I think that going forward, Apple at some point is going to make their own modems, and hopefully they can either surpass or meet the standards of what Qualcomm is already producing, and could possibly change the industry because other smartphones could look at them as a source, so they could also outsource their own chips. Intel is still going to take over some parts of atomic cars and other things, so they're not fully out as the of this part of the company, but Apple will be the majority holder of Intel's smartphone modems. Ooh.